considering they no longer had free access to such energy as they had revolted against council governance. They were essentially expatriated entities. Now, these entities, these 36, did not respect any rule of law. They had their own, perhaps, but they did not respect council governance and were to be stopped only through actual force. Now, these groups, such as the Pleiadians and the Andromedans, were, as well as others, were constantly scrutinizing their activities and actively blocking many of their efforts, which would be to drain energy from the earth or otherwise access energy, and the earth was full of energy. Now, since these entities could not physically interact within the earthly realm, they presumably made treaties with the major nations, to include the United States, many countries in Europe, and even some documented cases in Chile and Peru and other South American countries, especially those as you get closer to Antarctica. There's a lot of history or folklore in the southern South American area, Sector 422 in our time, and they had many encounters with gods, if you were, which of course would most likely the Syrians or some of one of those 36 roving bands of expatriated species or entities, and the high mountain ranges, the isolation would have been an excellent place to, of course, encounter. But their objective was to extract DNA from humans and animals, and you say, well, why would they want to do that? Well, if they want to use the energy from the earth and its people, it would be much easier if they could interact. And so it appears they were trying, since they were banned from interaction, essentially creating kind of a loophole by hybridization or hybrid species, which of course weren't banned. Something in that vein seems to be their operating method, but they certainly is a litany of examples of abductions. Some were, of course, not necessarily proven, but when you look at the long backlog, even if they weren't proven, you can go look at the documented instances of the various militaries and, of course, the testimonials, and to our mind, it is not a debate. Their objective was to extract DNA from humans and animals to further their artificial intelligence projects. You see, you get around the loophole. Let's say you're species A, you are banned from the Earth, you've got the Pleiadians and the Andromedans enforcing this, and it's too much trouble to take them on, but you can possibly, undercover, arrange for abductions and create a hybrid species using artificial intelligence with your DNA and all the knowledge, and you can see where they were going to create another species that could be implanted into the earth and just mixed right in, and there you go, you circumvent the quarantine and the ban from interfering. And this seems to be the motivation behind the Orions and others. Now, the President Eisenhower of America, there are some documentations. It's not necessarily revealed to the public that he did deal with the Orions, which were the Greys, a treaty to allow them to do their little abductions, and the military would cover it up and not acknowledge it. And in return, they received, as stated, military technology, very highly advanced. And of course, if that happened in the 50s, possibly earlier, and it does seem that the Germans, the Nazis, were already way ahead of anybody else with interacting with these species. There's an example of Admiral Byrd, who claimed to have flown his plane to the Arctic Circle, and there's a complete, we could go into that more in depth, but he had an interaction on the official log of his plane where his plane was inoperable, he landed, and he was in essentially the Middle Earth. And then they maintained his plane, sent him back, and he described what he saw. Of course, this didn't happen according to the military, and that's how they operated. But all these things have been going on, but the FRESCO incident is when many of the hidden things were revealed, and basically it was on. Hello, Oliver Harrington, here in the year 2021. We are studying the podcast of Frank Boomer, who was an American podcaster in 2021 and was instrumental in the in the FRESCO incident, and that of course was the breakthrough for the humanity and the entire earth. As you know, as we know, the details prior to the FRESCO incident are of course debated even today in 2018, and now here I am in 2021, right before the FRESCO incident, very closely before it occurs. And to be honest, there is very little, they're unaware and completely blindsided. Speaking of the general population of the earth, it came as a gut punch. It was totally unexpected, and it happened in the wink of an eye, and suddenly the events of the FRESCO incident were upon the earth. And of course, we are the benefactors ever since from this turn, this change of course of humanity, not necessarily totally initiated by mankind, as it was the beginning of interactions with the larger universe in microscopic baby steps, maybe at first, culminating, of course, into the FRESCO incident, which changed the course of Frank Boomer and the course of history as well as mankind. But as We speak